I'm going to guide you through the process of carving a redwood spoon out of a 2x4. I began by marking out the design on the face of the 2x4 in pencil, and then I made just some reference marks where the curvy part of the spoon meets the handle. And I looked at some Swedish spoon making tutorials on the Woodwright shop, and the way that they make that initial cut is by doing just this. They basically score a line and then with the grain use a hatchet or an axe to then remove that material. So right here you can see the saw marks. I was using a Japanese saw. That's where the neck of the handle is going to meet the cup of the spoon. And then I'm just tapping it out on concrete. I've got a bolo, which worked okay. I think something with a little bit of a weightier head would work just as well or better. And then I do the other side, and it removes quite a bit of material. This time lapse shows that I was using kind of this hook knife, like a chip carving knife that I got at Woodcraft, to do a lot of the whittling basically. And I don't know, I would say that it took, it doesn't take long to do the handle. It takes quite some time to do the shape of the bowl, shape of the spoon. And I think I ultimately found that my Swiss Army knife was a better knife overall. I could use that for the whole thing, which is more like a 2.5 inch, 3 inch blade. Now in the time lapse, what you're seeing here is that I'm using an old linoleum relief print blade, just a very cheap kind of set of different blades for carving linoleum, which is really the only thing I had, which is why I was using it to get the material carved out. And according to the Woodwright shop guy, who's the expert on the Swedish spoon carving, basically do the carving out of that bowl first. And for whatever reason I didn't do that, and it does make it a little more tricky to hold one side or the other depending on which way you're carving. The main thing is that you would use a more appropriate tool for this, like a proper spoon carving knife, a appropriate gouge, or you could use like one of those flat bottom bits on a drill press to remove a lot of the material. What I found was that because I was using crappy tools and the nature of the grain and the redwood and the whole thing, is that I was very likely to tear out the delicate part of the curves either on the outside or the inside. And I didn't have like unlimited resources, so what I decided to do is, instead of spend $30 to $40 on a knife that I didn't know would exactly work, I ended up getting a fairly cheap, probably the cheapest rotary device that I could with a carbide tip that really does work. It's not fast, and there are other kind of tips that you can get and so forth that would remove a lot more material. This just shows that I'm putting a hole through the tail end of the handle, and I'm going to put like a little utility weight rope on the end so I can hang it. And the design of this spoon is really because I wanted a dry goods spoon for pet food, so I didn't have to bend over the kind of canister that we have on the floor for the cats, and that's why it has the design that it does. And then I just cut that utility cord. I was trying to do the heating up of the rope so that it melted without scorching it. And I think actually the proper tool is a rope cutting blade. Kind of melt it down and then crimp it. It's probably a better way to do this. One of the things about that rotary tool is that the little lithium-ion battery in it did not last very long, so I ended up doing multiple sessions of either grinding with that carbide tip or sanding. And the sanding, when the sanding drums are new, actually removes a tremendous amount of material, which you have to be a little bit careful of. I mean, I was out there making the spoon for a good day, but you know, I have plenty of breaks where like I was just waiting for the battery to charge because I didn't want to mess around with something else. So if you had the right tools, even just a fairly comparable rotary tool that was just a corded tool, you'd get a lot done. And then I did 2 passes on the spoon, one with like, I believe like it was like a 150, 180. So I went like from fairly coarse to medium, and then finished it off, I think with like a 220, like a super fine sandpaper. Ultimately, you begin to look at the shape of the bowl, and you realize like, oh, like what does a spoon look like? And you've got to have that sort of bone-like curvature connecting the neck to the bowl, where it kind of narrows in and then sweeps up on the back, because it can be fairly thin, but it has to be vertically fairly continuous to gain the strength that you need. And what I did was I just kind of loosely searched some spoon shapes and so forth. What I'm going to do next here is just remove material so that it has more curvature and less unnecessary mass on that bowl. And I'm just doing that. I've switched here to my Swiss Army knife. So you can see that it's at the end of the day here, and I'm putting on the first coat of mineral oil, food grade mineral oil. And this redwood, I mean, originally is probably 1,000 years old, but it's been sitting, just a few pieces of it, in McCormick lumber yard for 50 years probably. So it's quite dry, and it soaks up a lot of oil. You know, off and on I put like 2, 3, 4 coats of the mineral oil on. So this is still like kind of a rough draft. This is just a macro photograph. I think I counted 30 rings. Gosh, I want to say it was something crazy like 15 growth rings per ½ inch. So like, okay, so 30 rings per inch. And then there's a Wikipedia entry, I believe, that gives it the average age of mature redwood of between 800 and 1,000 years old. And based on the McCormick lumber fire and how long it's been in Madison, Wisconsin, which is half a century, and equating that to when the species was still being harvested, one would assume that the trees that were harvested were mature trees. And looking at the number of growth rings at 30 years per inch and estimating like an average diameter, you know, reasonable diameter, even of a fairly young tree, like this wood came from a living organism that lived for between 500 and 1,000 years, like easily. And it really is wonderful wood to carve, and I hope I get an opportunity to do it again sometime.